Are you one of those people that thinks that paying rent is like flushing money down the toilet? Are you one of those people that thinks that buying a house is like buying an asset that will secure your financial future? Well, if you're one of those people, this video is for you because I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. That you're wrong. That you're wrong. Nah, just kidding. But no, actually you are. Because it's not as simple as that, and it's far more complicated than you think. I'm going to talk about 3 things that are absolutely crucial when you're thinking about buying or renting a house that you must absolutely consider. Stay till the end for the third one, where I'll talk about the most important thing, which is the financial ramification of buying a house versus renting it. With that, let's jump right in. So first of all, let's look at a couple of reasons as to why people buy houses. So in my head, there are 2 specific reasons. One are the emotional reasons and 2 are the financial reasons. Now, when it comes to emotions, there are a couple of different types of emotional reasons as to why people actually buy a house. One of them is for peace of mind. So some people love having tangible objects, right? Or tangible things that they can call their own, which gives them that peace of mind. Number 2 is aspirational, right? I mean, owning a house or owning a property gives that aspirational sense of success to that person who now thinks that, yep, I've bought a house, I've made it. If you ask me, all home ownership is an indicator of is how well qualified you are for a home loan. But I should probably not make such controversial statements. I mean, who do I think I am? Andrew Tate? Number 3, it's more like a lifestyle, right? I mean, you're trying to get that homeowner lifestyle because there's certain communities out there where you can only enter that community if you buy a house, and not all houses can be rented in that specific community, for example. One of the worst reasons, which unfortunately I've seen so much around, is that people buy a house to keep up with their friends or their colleagues, for that sole reason, just so that they don't feel like they're missing out or they get left out. And that's very, very unfortunate because one person's financial background might not be the same as the next person, but in order to keep up with all these different people who have absolutely no bearing on your financial aspects of your life is what gets people to unfortunately buy a house. And then of course, to cement that status in society that, hey, you're a homeowner now. And last but not least, one of the most important reasons as to why someone should buy the house for investment purposes, people want to cement their financial future. Thinking about buying a house from a financial perspective, there are a lot of different financial benefits to actually buying a house. Now, this only comes into play when you're actually thinking about using that house as a cash flow generating asset. Because even though a lot of people say that, hey, I own a house and it's an asset, well, it's not really an asset in my view. An asset is something that actually generates cash for you. If you buy a house and you're staying in the house, I'm sorry, but it's actually a liability because you're still on the hook for that loan, that mortgage that you're paying to the bank, which is significantly higher. So you're actually shelling out more money for a house. And we'll get into that in step number 3 when I talk about the financial ramifications of buying a house versus renting it. So now with that, let's jump into the 3 things that I think you should absolutely consider when you think about buying or renting a house. First and foremost, and this should be absolutely super simple, is be sure of the reason as to why you're buying a house. Like I just mentioned, some people go about buying a house just because they want to keep up with the Joneses or keep up with their colleagues or their friends. And I think that that's an absolutely absurd reason to buy a house, because now you're on the hook for a massive financial liability for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. Which could actually have a massive detriment, not just to your financial health, but also to your mental health if you're not able to keep up with the financial commitment of buying that house. Now, let's think about the reason, right? I mean, what could be a good reason for buying a house? Now, in certain places like the US and Canada, there's certain, people move locations or move geographies to be closer or to be within a vicinity of a good school. So in the US and Canada, it's pretty common that you get free access to public schools only if you live within a certain county or a zip code. And maybe that county or zip code doesn't really have rental properties, so it makes more sense to buy a house, especially if you're thinking about living in that property for an extended period of time. I think that's a phenomenal reason, and I think that's a very valid reason to actually buy a house. Make sure that you're absolutely sure of the reason that you're buying a house, and don't get sucked in to what your colleagues or your friends are doing, because at the end of the day, it's you that's responsible for the mortgage payments and not them. Number two, when buying a house, are you aware of the different types of costs that you'll be on the hook for prior to buying a house? A lot of first-time home buyers don't do a good enough job of wrapping their heads around all the different types of costs that are associated with buying and owning a house. Let's do a breakdown of the additional costs that you have to be on the hook for when you're buying a house as well as when you're renting it. So when you buy a house, there are a couple of different costs that you have to actually think about. So during the buying process, there's something called closing costs, which could be, it's part of your inspection costs, it's part of your broker fee, it's part of the processing or transaction fees, to the bank for your mortgage payment. And these closing costs could be anywhere between, 3 to 6% off the price of the house. In some countries, this could even be as low as 1 to 2%. Number two, so you've got general maintenance fees and upkeep fees anywhere between 0.5 to 1% a year, right? This could be things like general upkeep of the house, maintenance, your floorboards are creaking, your HVAC system is down, replacing it. Of course, it could be higher or lower. Certain places, it's absolutely a must to have homeowners insurance, and this homeowners insurance could be anywhere between 0.5 to 2%. Now, certain countries, and this is pretty common in places like the US and Canada, certain communities have this concept of a homeowners association. So this association is made up of the homeowners that live in that community and are responsible for the upkeep of general community areas, swimming pools, landscape, roads, etc. And they may have a certain fee that you're on the hook for that you need to pay them. And honestly, this fee could vary based on city, zip code, county, but again, you have to be mindful of these kinds of costs. Now, in other countries, and this is more prevalent in places in the East, Middle East, and Asia, instead of a homeowners association, you've got something called a service charge, which is something you might be paying again to the developer that's managing, or the property management company that's managing and maintaining your community. Now, this could be it could be a fixed fee, some percentage of the cost of the house when you bought it, or more than likely it's related to the size of your house and it's by square footage or square meter. Again, this is a hyper generalized cost estimation of the different types of costs that you need to be aware of when buying a house. But the point I'm trying to make is it's not as simple as just buying a house. There are all these different costs that you have to keep in mind and be aware of when you start to go down the journey and go down the path of actually buying a house. So we spoke about buying. What about renting? When you're renting a house, your costs aren't that high. You've got a 1 to 2 month security deposit, which as long as you don't burn down the apartment or do something absolutely crazy, you will get back at the end of your lease. And some places might actually require you to have renter's insurance, so that's another thing that you need to keep in mind for. But other than that, there are no other costs that as a renter that you need to keep in mind when renting, because everything else is taken care of by the land. Now, keep in mind, I'm not talking about utilities and gas and electricity and internet, because that applies to both owning a house as well as rent. Point number 3, the one that you've been waiting for, the financial ramification of buying a house versus renting it. Now let's play this out. You've got two families. Family A that wants to rent the house, and the monthly rent of the house is, let's assume it to be $3,000. And let's assume, for simplicity's sake, that they're living there for the next 30 years. Let's discount the fact that you've got renter's insurance, security deposit, etc. Let's just put that aside. So $3,000 a month for 30 years is about $1,080,000, right? So that's the amount of money that a renter would have ideally spent over a course of 30 years living in a house or an apartment that has a monthly rent of about $3,000. Now, on the other side, you've got family B that wants to buy a house of around $700,000. Let's assume a down payment of 20%, which is pretty common in most countries around the world. So the down payment, 20% of 700,000 is 140,000, which essentially means that you need a loan of around 560,000 from the bank. Now, looking at this calculator that I pulled up from NerdWallet, this type of house with this type of down payment, your approximate EMI or your monthly installment comes out to around $3,300. Again, like we did for family A, for simplicity's sake, we're going to discount HOA fees, maintenance fees, and broker's fees, etc. Keeping this in mind, let's just do again basic math. The total outgo at the end of 30 years for family B is $3,300 a month into, again, we're assuming that they're living there for 30 years, so 3,300 into 30 into 12, which comes out to $1,188,000. But also keep in mind that at the start of this journey, family B paid 20% down payment of $140,000. Now at this point, you're probably wondering, how is this possible? The price of this house was $700,000. How on earth have I ended up paying close to double the price of the house? Wait, how is that possible? After paying a down payment of 20%, $140,000, you were only supposed to be on the hook for $560,000, correct? Wrong. What about the interest? Do you think the bank is just going to give you that money for free? Hell no. Without complicating it too much for this video, have a look at this graph. The dark green is your monthly payment, which does not change, right? You're still paying $3,300 each month. But the light green is the interest that you're paying to the bank, and the yellow is basically you actually getting, or you paying down the principal amount, which is that $560,000. So the way this works is, so when you start your loan schedule, let's assume a 7% interest rate. In the first month, when you pay your $3,300, more than 95% of that $3,300 goes down towards paying your interest. Because when you start your loan in the first month, you're paying down the interest first, because 7% of 560,000 is significantly higher than 7% of 500,000. And you know why this is the way it is, right? Well, the banks need to make sure that they get their money out first. So let's just summarize. Family A, that's been renting for 30 years, has a total outgo of about $1 million, $1 million and some change. Family B, that bought the house, including a down payment of $140,000 plus the interest and the expense and a monthly installment of $3,300 across a period of 30 years, their total outgo is $1,328,000. Even without going into the next step, you can already see in this specific situation, it's much more expensive to buy as opposed to rent. But wait, the naysayers might say, well, what if this family sold off their house at the end of 30 years? Well, then I would say that keep in mind, while the house that you purchased was $700,000 in value, at the end of 30 years, you've actually paid out a total of $1.3 million. So even though you paid out $1.3 million, doesn't mean that the value of the house has automatically gone up to that level. You might think it is logical, but there are many wannabe real estate investors out there who would have you believe that,
oh, if your house value goes up from $700,000 to $900,000,
holy crap, dude, that's amazing. That's close to a 30% increase in value. You should absolutely sell. You will be losing money. If you look at your finances as a whole, you will be losing money. Now, here's something interesting that I want you to think about, because money is about opportunity cost. What could you have used that money instead? Now, instead of taking that $140,000 and putting it against a house, if family B would have taken the $140,000, invested it into an S&P fund or an index fund, or an REIT, and we'll do a different video on, some of the basics of investing. And let's just assume, because over the long term, irrespective of what's happening in the market right now, the market always goes up in the long term. Assume an average return of about 9% a year for $140,000 for 30 years. Let's do some math. Here is what it's going to look like. $140,000 invested in year one gets you about 9% return, which is, let's do some quick math. At the end of year one, becomes 152,600. Now, 152,600 again, goes up by 9% into 1.09, and it becomes 166,000. So already you see that in 2 years, your 140,000 has gone up by 22,000. Again, the power of compound. You do this for 30 years, and your 140,000 becomes $1.8 million. Would you rather have $1.8 million in your bank at the end of 30 years, or a house that you may or may not get as much value out of? So again, I tell you, the decision to buy versus rent is not as simple as this for the average person. You have to be a bit more financially savvy to truly understand the cost of buying a house versus renting it. But at the very least, you can be as informed about the different aspects of owning a house and make sure that you make the right decision with the right frame of mind. That's all I've got for you today. If you like this video, do like and subscribe, and stay tuned for some interesting content that I'll be dropping next week around how do you set up your investing master plan for 2023. Because again, remember, you don't want to leave money in your account, because if you watch this video right here, you'll know that inflation is continuously eating away at that money. Stay tuned and stay lit.